The Soul Selects Her Own Society by Emily Dickinson. The soul selects her own society, then shuts the door. On her divine majority obtrude no more. Unmoved, she notes the chariots pausing at her low gate. Unmoved, an emperor is kneeling upon her mat. I've known her from an ample nation. Choose one, then close the valves of her attention like stone.
Emily Dickinson led a very private life and was extremely reluctant to reveal herself or her work to the world. Of her 1,775 poems she wrote in her lifetime, only 7 were published before she died. Only a select few of her close family and friends ever experienced her poetic genius until after her death. Dickinson was born in 1830 to a prominent lawyer of Massachusetts. This was during the Transcendentalist movement, which later influenced her writing. Her childhood was considered normal, but she soon became very isolated as she approached adulthood. After her father's death in 1874, she seldom left the house. Dickinson communicated with small notes and poems to the few friends she still had. She was said to always dress in all-white clothing and would not allow neighbors or strangers to see her. As she grew more ill, she would only allow doctors to examine her from a distance. After fighting illness for 2 years, Emily Dickinson died in the same house in which she had been born. Her sister soon discovered packets of poems in her old dresser. Dickinson had left instructions that if they were found, they were to be destroyed after her death. Against her wishes, the poems were organized and edited by various family members and published in small collections. In 1955, the Poems of Emily Dickinson was published, and her work was finally recognized as a whole, revealing it to the world and allowing her genius to be fully recognized. Though she lived her life in almost complete isolation, Emily Dickinson is a voice of intense delicacy and urgency rising out of stillness. Today, she is widely regarded as one of the greatest American poets.
The poem The Soul Selects Her Own Society was written by Emily Dickinson and focuses on the private lives of individuals and how one selects how he or she wants to live. In the first stanza, Dickinson talks about how the soul does the choosing and how individuals are controlled by the soul. The soul gives high or low value to any circumstance. In stanza 1, line 3, the phrase divine majority is presented. Divine majority can be thought of as a higher power or a god that controls the soul. The previous line refers to the closing of a door. This can be interpreted as making your final decision and creating your own destiny. The second stanza mentions chariots, gates, emperors, kneeling, and mats. These indicate status. Although the soul should not be affected by outside forces, it is, and can change the way a person thinks. The line mentioning the chariots can be thought of as a person coming to their final decision. The soul is unmoved by the emperor kneeling, showing that again, the soul works independently and isn't affected by outside forces. Ample nation shows that the soul has many options and chooses how it wants to live its life. In stanza 3, line 12, the phrase like stone finishes the poem, and stone is thought of as natural, hard, cold, has softness and possible flexibility. That is how the soul is thought of, cold and natural like stone. This poem overall is analyzing how the soul functions and chooses what type of life it wants to lead. The soul selects her own society and has the right to choose no matter who you are. During the time this poem was written, when the nation was divided into the North and South, creating social barriers not allowing people or their souls to choose their own society. Everyone should have a fair chance and the right to decide what type of life they want to lead. It shouldn't matter on your race, gender, income, nationality, language, social class, or education. Everyone should have equal rights on how they want to live.
This work relies heavily on underlying messages. To help you further understand, let's look at some quotes. line 1, stanza 2. Unmoved, she notes the chariots pausing at her low gate. This quote shows that the narrator could have an emperor arrive at her door. Dickinson could be referring to suitors. Even if an emperor is at her door, she still will not open up to him. If the door to her heart is shut, then it is shut no matter what rank the suitor is of. Lines 2 and 3, stanza 1. Then shuts the door on her divine majority. This quote shows that the narrator has shut everyone else out and decides to devote herself to God. Lines 3 and 4, stanza 3. Then close the valves of her attention like stone. The narrator chooses to isolate herself from the rest of the world. This describes her final decision, and the metaphor describes her soul as hard, cold, and strong. Symbols are used in poetry to help convey a message. There are a few symbols in A Soul Selects Her Own Society. In the beginning of the poem, the door, or the closing of the door, represents the narrator's isolation from suitors. Also in the beginning of the poem, the emperor represents the powers of the world that will try to tempt the narrator away from her divine majority. And in the middle of the poem, the chariot symbolizes worldly status and superiority. Due to Emily Dickinson's unique style of writing, there are typically only a few themes that can be interpreted in many ways. The themes can be wrapped up into one statement. The three themes are as follows: love, isolation, and devotion. The narrator displays her love and devotion for God by isolating herself from possible suitors and from the outside world.
Although it is a short poem, literary elements can be found throughout the three stanzas. Personification is found in line 1, the soul selects her own society. Dickinson states that the soul possesses human characteristics. It cannot select her own society, for a soul is not a physical being, nor has its own mindset and decision-making. In line 2, the door is a metaphor in the first stanza, because once the door is shut, the soul closes herself from the divine majority due to her choice. The poem discusses the choosing of a set group or people, and then shutting oneself off from the rest. This metaphorical door that the soul closes describes the decision the soul made in choosing a set of people and closing oneself off from the excess. The first stanza goes on to incite how those she closed the door on will obtrude no more. The soul has closed its door permanently and shows no desire to return. There was no actual door being closed. It is only there to symbolize the selection that was made and shows the stubbornness and finality of the character's verdict. The poem mainly consists of iambic trimeter with an occasional tetrameter. It is more irregular than Dickinson's other poems. Although the poem is written in ABAB, the long dashes that create pauses throughout the piece gives it the Dickinson-esque aspect to it, despite its atypical aspects.
Directions. Answer the following questions. After the question is read, pause the video to allow time to discuss and answer. Question 1. What is the divine majority Dickinson talks about in The Soul Selects Her Own Society? Question 2. Explain the significance of the title. Question 3. In this poem, what leaves the soul unmoved? Question 4. Describe Dickinson's voice and how that is portrayed in The Soul Selects Her Own Society. Question 5. How is the theme of isolationism represented in this poem, and why is that important?
The Soul Selects Her Own Society by Emily Dickinson. The soul selects her own society, then shuts the door. On her divine majority obtrude no more. Unmoved, she notes the chariots pausing at her low gate. Unmoved, an emperor is kneeling upon her mat. I've known her from an ample nation. Choose one, then close the valves of her attention like stone.